information to companies that give them control over how that information is used.
That report from Donna Diamond. I'm joined now by Billy Hawkes, the Data Protection Commissioner, and I'm joined by TJ McIntyre, who's Chairman of Digital Rights Ireland and a law lecturer at UCD. TJ, I suppose we shouldn't let Google or anybody else define privacy for us. We have our own definition. I suppose the question is it gone, or has it been so seriously eroded that effectively we're open to an avalanche of advertising every time we click?
Privacy isn't dead, but it is certainly under very serious threat, and we're at a turning point now where if we don't take charge of what the internet giants, including Facebook and Google, are doing, it may well be irreparably lost. Now, to do that, it's important to bear in mind we need a well-resourced regulator, and you pointed out there that the Data Protection Commissioner is seeking additional resources. It was striking when I was carrying out research lately to learn that the budget for the Commissioner's work had gone down from €2 million in 2008 to €1.2 million in 2010 without, in fact, at a time when the work was increasing dramatically.
I want to come back to that and bring in Billy on it, but just on the question of privacy, I mean, what is it that these people have and how is it that they're using it that we should be worried?
You have to remember that these services are not really free. They're free in the sense that the user is in charge, but of course if you're not charged for a product, then you're not the customer, you are the product, and you are the person being sold to the advertiser. So the data you generate about your web browsing habits, what it is that you do, what it is you're interested in buying, is very, very valuable to an advertiser, and notwithstanding privacy policies, there's a very strong temptation for companies to sell that data, even in situations where they might have promised that they wouldn't.
Right, but you heard the man from Google say we don't sell it to a third party. We make it available to advertisers. Now, we're being bombarded with advertising anyway, so what's the difference? You don't have to click on the ad, you can ignore it. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is that increasingly the data is centralised in one place. It used to be the case that if you visited 20 different sites, then 20 different entities had little snapshots of you, but none of them had the full picture. Now, if you find that Google advertising is spread over those 20 different sites, or that the Facebook like button is spread over 20 different sites, suddenly that one entity has a picture of your entire web browsing for the day.
The question, Billy, really is how is it being abused, or how might it be abused? Obviously, we'd be worried if we thought that they were selling the information to, let's say, the police or an insurance company. But if it's just for the means of directing advertising at us, why should we be worried?
Well, I think it's a fair point. As TJ says, we are getting a service of which we're not charged. The deal is that in return, we give personal information to these services. The more refined the personal information is, the higher the charge they can charge advertisers for this, which is fundamentally what's behind the new Google privacy policy, because with the change, they can put together information they know about you from your habits on YouTube, Gmail, and so on. And with a better knowledge of what you're like and what your tastes are like, they can charge more to advertisers for that information and more accurately target you. So yes, it is a choice. We have all bought in essentially to this deal that we get these services without paying for them, and in return we do part with some personal information.
And if you were to ask people, you can opt out of this but you'll pay every time you click on a website or pay every time you use Google, I think they'd go for the first option, wouldn't they?
Yes, it's obviously people that feel like have voted with their feet on that. I'm not aware of any service that charges in return for not serving you advertising. So this is now the accepted model in the internet, whether it's Google, Facebook or other services like that.
Within those terms of reference, DJ, what should change from your point of view that would satisfy people that their privacy wasn't being seriously eroded?
Well, first of all, you have to ask, how is the data that is being gathered being used? Facebook, for example, were recently accused of outing a gay teenager to his parents when they saw his Facebook page open, and on that page there were targeted ads which were aimed at gay men in London. And while he obviously hadn't made public the fact of his sexuality, the fact that these ads appeared in his profile was enough to tip off his parents. But they didn't deliberately out the young fella. I mean, that was a coincidence, if you like, that resulted in it. Absolutely. There's no question that they deliberately revealed his information, but the effect was to indirectly reveal his sexual preferences. And many other people are finding that searches that they carry out, for example, or products that they buy can be leaked to third parties. Again, giving away a lot of personal information that way.
Who does that, and when did it happen?
Well, this is something that's happened with Facebook in particular on a number of different occasions. There was one technology in particular they used called Beacon, which revealed details of people's purchasing habits to their friends. Now, in one case, for example, it revealed to a lady that her boyfriend had bought a ring. Now, fortunately, it turned out to be a ring for her, but nonetheless, it gave the game away.
But what changes would you like to see, and aim specifically at doing what in terms of regulation?
Well, the solutions are partially legal, but they're also partially technological, and they're partially economic. From a legal perspective, the European Union has proposed new regulation, which, if brought in, will greatly strengthen the protection available. From a technological perspective, we need to give users more control and more ownership of their own data. We have a very centralised system at the moment. We hand over all our data to large companies to place in their servers. We need to take charge of that and bring it home to the individual user. And finally, from an economic perspective, you do have to have alternative business models where we don't have to sell our privacy to get certain services.
Billy Hawkes, just talk about the regulation and the EU-wide regulation. What will Ireland's responsibility be in relation to policing those companies that are based here in Ireland but which have Europe as a market?
Well, what the new EU law proposes is that every such company would have a so-called one-stop shop. In other words, it would be subject to the jurisdiction of a single regulator. Now, since thanks to the good work of the IDA, many of these companies have chosen Ireland as their European headquarters, that means that for many of these companies, we will be the single regulator for European users, which is, of course, a significant responsibility.
Do you have the people, the resources to do that?
No, certainly not at present, as Gary Davis said on that clip. We clearly need more resources to adequately do this job. I think the country has learned lessons from the financial services area. In other words, when we successfully attract companies, we have a duty to European countries to demonstrate that we can credibly regulate these entities, and to do so we need more resources. Obviously, we're not looking for vast resources. We know the country is in a difficult position, but I think the government understands the need to properly resource the main regulator in this area.
Is there a case for getting funds from Europe, given that essentially you're doing a Europe-wide job?
One could certainly try that, but given, shall we say, that the lack of enthusiasm in certain European countries for the successful efforts of the IDA in attracting such companies here, and the tax reasons why some of them are here, I wouldn't exactly be too hopeful about getting European money.
Do you think, and not necessarily those that are already here, but do you think when some of the big companies in this area look at a potential site or place to base their Europe operations, they look at little old Ireland with 22 people down in Portlaoise and say, well, we're going to get a soft ride here. These guys can't police us. Let's not go to France. Let's not go to Britain. Let's go to Ireland.
I don't think it is, and when we're based down in Portarlington and very happily based there, I think what they are looking at primarily is the other attractions of Ireland from the point of view of taxation, availability of trained staff and so on.
But I think an understaffed office would suit their purposes, wouldn't it?
Well, I think that's going to change, and I think the only plus we can offer is that we're quite willing to talk to companies. Our general approach both to foreign and domestic companies is to explain to them what their obligations are, and obviously try to talk through what that means for their particular company.
TJ, I mean, we've concentrated almost exclusively on Google, but Facebook gets a mention too. There are other companies, but presumably these companies are very shrewd. They know where the money is, and they're not going to abuse that trust they have with those people who use their service, because it's the end of their business.
In some cases. That depends on how reputable the individual company is. Sometimes that's absolutely the case. But even then, you're dependent on the individual knowing what it is that they're signing up to, knowing what it is they've agreed to let their data be used for. Fantastic study in the US a couple of years ago identified the fact that the average internet user visits about 1,400 websites a year. The average privacy policy on those websites is 2,500 words a year, is 2,500 words. If you multiply that out and you assume that each privacy policy takes 10 minutes to read, you would be reading for 76 days solid if you gave it 8 hours a day to read each one.
They need to simplify it to a couple of paragraphs and a box you can tick, a yes or no, so
Absolutely.
you can opt out and quickly.
But partly, again, this is not necessarily a legal problem. This is a problem of technology being used to track us, and hopefully it's a problem where technology used by the consumer can help to protect our privacy in future.
Final question for you, Billy Hawkes, just on another issue, and it's been raised again today in relation to the state's use of our utility bills, of ESB bills, in terms of tracking people down and getting them to pay their household charge. You had concerns about this earlier in the year and you voiced them. Has the government gone any way towards assuaging your worries on that issue?
Well, yes, it has. The Department of the Environment has agreed to negotiate a protocol with our office which would involve limiting the information that would be sought from such utility companies, and also making sure that once it is obtained, that it is safely secured and destroyed when no longer required. So we hope to finalise that protocol before there is any access to utility company information.
Billy Hawkes, TJ McIntyre, thank you both indeed for coming in tonight. Miriam.